European football show, a brand new show to Love Sport Radio. Me, Matt Beadle, here with you until 10:30 this evening with the guys from Get Football. Adam White, hello Adam.
Hi mate.
And Jeremy Smith. Hello Jeremy.
Hello.
Now, we're going to be talking all things European football this evening. You two are experts. You know your stuff. You know your details. What is coming up?
Yeah, so we're going to be here every Monday night from 9:30 till 10:30, talking in detail, as you mentioned there, Matt, about European football, the top 5 leagues. And it's been a pretty busy summer of transfers and a pretty busy summer of international tournaments. But over the course of the show, we're going to be talking Antoine Griezmann's move to Barcelona. We're going to be talking Maurizio Sarri's move to Juventus. We're going to be talking Leonardo's return to PSG and what that means for Neymar. And we're going to be talking about a new look Bayern Munich going in to the new season. But first, I thought we'd talk about the summer of football that we've had. We've had so many international tournaments, Copa America, the Women's World Cup, even the under-21s, and a number of on-running transfer sagas. So I'd like to ask Jez, what stood out for you over the course of the summer, Jez? Anything that's going to keep you interested going into the new season?
Well, as a Brighton fan, I'm thinking of giving up football right now after knockouts.
He's dropped Brighton into the equation straight away. Nice. We'll get that out of the way early, shall we?
It's got to be done. But yeah, also talking transfers, I think it's been quite exciting that this summer, from a sort of French point of view, which is kind of more my area, that practically all the big transfer sagas have involved either French players or Ligue 1-based players. So you mentioned Griezmann, there's obviously Ndombele, Saliba, who's probably going to sign for Arsenal tomorrow, Pogba, will he or won't he? And obviously the big one is Neymar, the fascinating saga that isn't boring anyone at all.
Yeah, absolutely. With Neymar, we're going to talk a lot about him later. One thing I would like to get your thoughts on PSG a little bit. How do we see their transfer policy going forward into next season?
Well, we'll be talking more later about Leonardo, but I think it's been quite interesting that he gave an interview recently in which he said we're just going to slow things down now. So I don't think there's going to be any massive movement. Obviously a lot depends on Neymar and whether he goes and what PSG get for him, whether it's players or cash, but I don't think we're going to see any ridiculous splashing of cash like we've seen the last couple of years. I think Leonardo's going to slow things down and hopefully a bit of consolidation before they sort of take the next step forward.
Yeah, sticking with France, one thing that's kind of stuck out for me over the course of the summer is Nabil Fekir's transfer, which seems to be going through sort of as we speak a little bit. But you look at last summer when he was at the point at Liverpool with picking his own shirt number, he posed with his shirt, having pretty much signed for the club, and of course that fell through. There's been talk in the French press about a real reason that deal fell through, but the common story is that knee injury picked up on French international duty sort of came back to bite him. Even though he passed the medical, it was still an issue, and that deal with Liverpool fell through. And you fast forward 12 months, and that 60 million pound offer that Lyon accepted, that those bids that they were receiving and they were being talked about, 20 million to Real Betis is quite some sort of come down there, and 20 million plus 10 million of add-ons, I think we're talking. And it just goes to show one, the relationship that Fekir has with the club, because obviously this is an agreement they've had in advance with Jean-Michel Aulas, the president, that he would leave this summer almost at pretty much any cost. And last summer I don't see them accepting 20 million or 30 million at all from any club. And to go to Real Betis, rather than sticking with Lyon for another season, perhaps another season of Champions League football, another season perhaps less injury related, less injury worries for him. He gets a bigger bid coming in to start next season. Is it a good move, do you think? I think this is a bit of a step down and perhaps a sideways step at best for Fekir.
Yeah, I think so too. I saw something today about how Conte wants to get rid of Perisic from Inter, and I was thinking, has any player's stock fallen so much within 1 year? And then I thought about Nabil Fekir, and it is a strange one because this time last year, or just a little bit more than that, everyone seemed to be after him. He's won a World Cup since then. Okay, didn't play a lot, but I thought played well when he did get the odd chance to come on. It seems a pity that he's chosen, with all due respect to Betis, a sort of mid-table Spanish club where he's also going to have a lot of midfield competition as well, when he could be looking at, I think, teams in the Champions League or certainly pushing for Europe. There's rumours today that his younger brother, who Lyon fans aren't particular fans of, is going to be going with him to Betis, and there's suggestions that was kind of the the decider that none of the other teams were interested in taking his brother as well. And I just think it's a pity if, a World Cup winner, a player who basically, on his day is amongst the best in the world, carried Lyon into the Champions League knockout stages last year, if he's picking his next club based on what's best for his little brother, I think it's a little bit of a waste of a great career.
Yeah, Yassine Fekir, I think he got a couple of appearances for Lyon's first team, and there was a little bit of hype surrounding him, but possibly because he was Nabil Fekir's brother rather than anything else. I didn't see anything particularly special from him. One thing you mentioned there with France kind of being the centre of a lot of the transfer speculation this summer, one deal that's a little bit removed from France that perhaps has gone a little bit under the radar, rather unusually so, is Gareth Bale. It's something that's really stood out to me this summer, that it's been relatively quiet, considering transfer rumours of previous summers involving players of such stature and profile. I think it's a really interesting situation that he's kind of priced himself out of the market a little bit. He's in something of a golden cage when you think that Real Madrid aren't going to accept a bid of less than 100 million. Maybe perhaps even more than that, 130, perhaps even more than that.
So you really think that it's going to take that much money for Gareth Bale? You think it plus 100 million?
I think that's because of the market. I think Florentino Perez will look at the market and not accept anything less. When you look at other players going for of less repute and of arguably less ability for similar fees. If you look at someone like Philippe Coutinho, who went for more than that, obviously slightly different situation, perhaps in much better form when he was at Liverpool, and that looks like a much worse deal now. But even if you look at Pogba, Jean-Michel Aulas talked about that as a guy priced for Tanguy Ndombele, and I think Perez would do a very similar thing at Real Madrid and think that he sees other players going for similar fees, and it's who's going to spend that money, because he's an injury-prone 29-year-old whose wages are astronomical, and you're going to need to spend 130 million to get him. I just don't see a club that dives in, and perhaps he will spend the next 2 summers training every weekend and playing golf at the weekends, like some of the Madrid fans think he does anyway.
Well, that's it, and that's the tough situation that they find themselves in now, Madrid, because they're going to have to pay 50 million plus to get him out of his contract if that's what they really want to do. If I was Gareth Bale, especially after Zidane's comments yesterday, which I personally thought were a bit classless, a bit out of order, to say that we want him out tomorrow, to say that we just need to get it sorted when he's still a player at the club, I'd be inclined to dig my heels in. But then is it going to be really difficult for him at the club with the manager not on board with him, seemingly the players, like you said, Thibaut Courtois referred to him as the golfer, I think, in one interview.
Yeah.
It's going to be really difficult for him. But then can he go anywhere else? You mentioned France, the swap deal with Neymar. I mean, is that likely?
I think that's pretty unlikely. Although PSG are one of those clubs that you think would be linked with Gareth Bale because they've got the spending power. They like the big names, but they've never really been interested. There's been sort of rumours, but it's only been kind of out of sort of circumstance rather than anything concrete as far as I understand it. But I think you're absolutely right about the toxic atmosphere at Real Madrid that surrounds Gareth Bale. I think there was a situation last season where he was getting such sort of stick from the fans that he was clean for on goal and being whistled, which is a bizarre situation to be in. Any links with PSG, do you think there, Jeff?
I think it's a strange situation with Bale anyway, the way things have changed, especially with Zidane, because I mean Bale pretty much did win Real a couple of Champions League finals, and okay, I get that his stock's gone down, that the injuries are an issue, and it's a real sort of kind of transition period for Real Madrid, but it does seem a pity, even though there's all these stories about how he never really kind of gelled with the team, never made the effort to learn the language. It seems a pity that it's ending on such a sour note. But in terms of PSG, I think well, even looking at the other way round on the other side of the deal, there were only ever vague rumours about Neymar going to Real Madrid. Certainly Barcelona are the team that are more linked. So yeah, I'm not sure that's any kind of goer. I'm not sure sort of replacing one supposedly global player with dodgy knees or dodgy ankles with another one with dodgy knees. I'm not sure that's the best idea from PSG.
You mentioned William Saliba previously. I think that's a really interesting transfer as well that sort of rubbled on over the course of the summer, because he only really broke into the Saint Etienne team at the start of last season. He played the last sort of 7-8 games. He was in and out of the squad, and he did play well in when he was given opportunities because of injuries and because of cup games. But it's a very small sample size for a club to spend. Some club like Arsenal, who have a limited transfer budget as it is this summer, to spend 30 million on a player that's very unproven, is very young, and won't even play for them next season because Saint Etienne are insisting that he goes back on loan next season. How do you see that transfer? Because it's a bit of a gamble, isn't it? And an odd use of resources apart from anything else.
It is a risk, and I've seen a few Arsenal fans say, knowing our luck, he'll do his Achilles or something during this season. But I think possibly where Arsenal are, and the fact that they've got a lot less money to spend, it seems, than their rivals, maybe they're sort of having to gamble and go for these younger talents. And I think Saliba has hopefully shown enough during the sort of 2/3 of the season that he's played to kind of show that he really is a star of the future. I think he's got a sort of good head on his shoulders and certainly sort of taken to first team football really well. And then in terms of the financial side, apparently because he's going to be on loan to Saint-Etienne, Arsenal aren't going to have to put down any large payments until next year, so that frees up a little bit more transfer funds for this summer. So possibly it's actually quite a canny move on Arsenal's part.
Definitely a very talented player. He looks so assured and so calm on the ball alongside Loic Perrin at the heart of Saint-Etienne defence. It'd be great to see him stay in Ligue 1. As watchers of Ligue 1 as we are, it'd be great to see him stay for another season and really progress, because I think he's a player that has played really well to start with and looks like a really promising talent, but needs a season to develop. And hopefully by returning Saint-Etienne on loan, they're a club that look keen to develop those sort of young players going forward. So it'd be great to see him spend another season on loan there. One thing that has stood out for me over the course of the summer, that a little bit broader sense, is that I think there, with the promoted clubs of each of the top 5 leagues, you've got some really interesting stories from those teams. You look across, say Germany, Paderborn, who have had a really unusual few seasons where they've almost been promoted and relegated in pretty much every season for the last 3 or 4, and they found their way back into the Bundesliga miraculously. And you've got Union Berlin, who are everyone's second favourite hipster club after St. Pauli. Real Mallorca back in Spain would be really interesting after years in the doldrums in the lower reaches of Spanish football. Even you've got a mid-90s feel to the Premier League promoted clubs with Norwich and Sheffield United and Aston Villa as well. And in France we've got Metz on the rise. Jez, your club, of course. Excited for Metz return to Ligue 1?
I'm very excited, and very excited for our Ligue 2 promotion push again next year as we go up and down as we usually do.
Is this very much a case of having a club in every country, guys? Is that what I can expect from the two of you?
Yeah,
to some extent.
Nice. Okay, well, that is the first segment down. After the break, we're going to be talking to Rich Hall from the Gentleman Ultra, all about Maurizio Sarri, all about Juve. Is he the right fit for Juventus? Coming up after this.
Like tennis. This is Love Sport.
Yep, you are listening to Love Sport Radio. Me, Matt Beadle, here with Adam White and Jeremy Smith from Get Football for our brand new Get Football European Football Show. If you want to get in touch with us, it's very easy to do so. Drop us a line, 0208 70 20 558. You can also WhatsApp us on that line, or you can send us a tweet at Love Sport Radio. Now, I'm delighted to say we've got Rich Hall from the Gentleman Ultra on the line. He's going to be talking all things Maurizio Sarri and Juventus. How you doing, Rich?
How you doing, guys? You okay?
Very good, thank you. Now, before I pass on to the guys, just one very early question that everybody across football is asking. Is Maurizio Sarri, after what we saw at Chelsea last season here in England, the right fit for Juventus and, more importantly, for Cristiano Ronaldo?
It's a great question, just on the basis that he's completely the opposite of what Juventus normally go for. That's in his philosophy, the way he is as a person. Even we know from what we've seen at Chelsea. I think he even toned it down from his days at Napoli. He's very very politically incorrect. He's very rough around the edges. He's got a philosophical idea of how to play football that's more important than winning. And when you look at Juventus and Max Allegri preceded him, their motto is winning's not the most important thing; it's the only thing that counts. So this is a real left field approach for Juventus. They're looking at changing their style of play because even though they've won multiple Scudetto and Coppa Italias over the last couple of seasons, Agnelli and some of the fans also started to feel that it was just quite not enough. The Champions League was their main aim as well last season, hence Ronaldo came in. It didn't quite work out as they wanted them to. But I think to understand Maurizio Sarri, the reason they've looked to take him on is because what the Agnellis are trying to do with Juventus, and they've done it over the last couple of seasons, we've seen the kit now been changed to appeal to American audiences. The badge has been changed to a more of a brand. That's what he's wanting to do with the club, is to make them a brand. And so for that to work and for that to be popular, it needs attractive football. They think Maurizio Sarri is the man to do it. But that's going to take time. So that's the big question that's being asked all in Italy all this summer, because it also allows other teams to maybe, for this just one time only, have a chance of breaking that Juventus monopoly.
Rich, I'd really like to get your thoughts on the immediate future for this team, because this feels like a team that's very much built to win now. It's a relatively old squad, although they've added one or two younger players, Baggio and Rabiot, coming over the course of summer. Ronaldo's getting on a little bit. What are the immediate expectations for this team? Because we've seen with Maurizio Sarri in the past that although he's a very innovative coach, his ideas take a little while to bed in. Is this a team that's built to win the Champions League, which is obviously their ultimate goal this season, or is it something that's going to take a little bit longer? And are they really set up to do that?
This is, again, that's a really good point, because the question is, it does well. We know it takes time with Maurizio Sarri to implement those ideas. Also, as well, looking at the style of coach he is. I mean, you mentioned before about Cristiano Ronaldo. He is a coach first and foremost, and the ex-merchant banker isn't going to be able to really tell Ronaldo exactly what to do. He's not the type of man-manager that maybe Allegri was. And you're right, this team is set up to win the Champions League. That's why they invested in Ronaldo. Even with the likes of De Ligt coming in, that's a big money signing. We all know how good he was and how mature he is as well, in a sense. So, yeah, this team is set up to win the Champions League. The Scudetto is the absolute bare minimum for Maurizio Sarri this season. Realistically, it wasn't enough for Allegri last season. He should have won the Coppa Italia as well, according to the Agnellis, especially now that Nedved and Patrici are really focusing on Juventus moving forward with force. And so Maurizio Sarri hasn't got time. He is expected to win immediately, and that's why it's really quite interesting.
How is this move being perceived by the Italian press? I remember when Gianpiero Gasparini obviously did very well at Atalanta last season, took over at Inter. There were sections of the Milanese press that really sort of almost hounded him out of the club. He was only in charge for 5 games, and I think he lost 4 of those. Is there a sense that, because, as you mentioned previously, that Sarri isn't a typical Juve coach, they tend to go with the sort of Capello type, the sort of suit-wearing, almost establishment coach. Is there a sense in the press that they're on board with this appointment? Is it something that could sort of topple off quite quickly?
I think it sort of goes two ways. I think it's very much a wait-and-see attitude from all of the main Italian media streams. I mean, they lost in the International Champions Cup to Tottenham, and no one went to town on that. It was seen as, they picked up on a few things that they obviously looked a lot less fit than Tottenham. But the press are holding back a little bit in Italy for one reason. I think part of them, especially the likes of Tutto Sport, Turin-based paper, would absolutely love to see Maurizio Sarri really bring this Juventus team and turn them into something that plays football in the same style as not exactly the same, of course, but in a nice free-flowing way like Barcelona or Manchester City. There is that sort of appeal, but I think a lot of the Italian press are waiting for that season to start, because when you look at the likes of Inter, you look at the likes of Napoli over the summer, they've got serious challenges now. Everything doesn't look okay, 100% perfect at Inter yet. Napoli have gone very much under the radar and still got work to do. But these teams could easily hit the ground running. So I think that the press in general are just holding back. But if it starts badly for Maurizio Sarri, I think, it's like any big team in any league who's very dominant. Everyone wants to jump on them as soon as they fall.
We touched a bit about their newer signings. You mentioned De Ligt previously, Aaron Ramsey, and a number of Serie A based players. Where do you see those players fitting in, and who do you see as being sort of the most important player? Who's of those that signed? Who's going to improve this team? Who's going to really kick them on to that Champions League trophy that they're so desperate to win?
Well, it's quite an interesting one in one respect. De Ligt coming into the back, I think he's massively important. Just because I know that he's so young. But he is a player who could technically, hit the ground running. I think he's absolutely superb, and they really need to get some youth into that back line. It's been aging for so long. Also, not a new signing, but Daniele Rugani, who a lot of coaches, including Allegri, have really struggled to get the best out of. He played for Maurizio Sarri at Empoli, and he really did get a tune out of him. So he's a talent that could really come back through. So the defence in that respect, will look, hopefully this season for them, a lot stronger. I think two of you mentioned Rabiot and Aaron Ramsey, of course. I think they're quite interesting signings, especially Ramsey, if he can stay fit. He's going to have a chance to play a lot further up the pitch. He had an excellent press conference. He really, the Italian media really took to him when he came out the other week, spoke in Italian already, very conscious of the Juventus history, mentioned the likes of John Charles as well for a little Welsh touch, and he was very, very full of praise for Maurizio Sarri and said he was going to play a lot further up the pitch. So Juventus, even though people have looked at Juventus and thought that the defence has been the weakest point, and they have addressed that midfield last season was really looking shaky with the likes of Matuidi not having the best of seasons, Emre Can, Khedira. It did look a little flat. So I think those two acquisitions at present could really see them go forward. And I think one to watch as well is the situation with Mauro Icardi. Inter is still desperate, absolutely desperate to get him off the books. And whilst it looks like no one really wants him at this moment in time, I think a lot of the Italian press are predicting that Juventus will wait right till the end and try and get him on a much reduced price. And if they could fit someone like that when they've already got Cristiano Ronaldo up there, that could be really, really exciting.
Brilliant stuff, Rich Hall. Fascinating to hear from you. Thanks very much, mate.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. I'd love to get your thoughts on Rabiot. We touched on him very briefly there, but he's a rather unusual player. I get the sense watching PSG over the course of the last few years that he's kind of the classic PSG sort of entitlement player, that he's come through the youth system and he's grown up with this PSG under QSI rule, and it's sort of been ingrained upon him that PSG are the team that deserve to win everything. And when we look at the World Cup squad last year, we refused to be part of the standby list, and then obviously was sort of exiled from the team and spent weeks training with the reserves and didn't play at all in the second half of the season. What does he have to change to be a success at Juve, and will he be a success at Juve? Is he good enough to play in that team?
I think he is. I think the only thing that he needs to change really is attitude. I know that there's a sort of revisionist view that he was no good on the pitch for PSG, but I think he more often than not performed well. Certainly in Champions League, when a lot of very good players went missing, I think he generally didn't. And I think his main issues are all off the pitch. There's obviously lots of rumours about the influence of his mum, and which probably doesn't help, and possibly moving away from Paris might help him in that sense as well. But I just think if he can get his head together, he's moved to a club like Juventus, which as Rich said has got such a rich history. I think if he can sort of, know his place, kind of exactly as Ramsey did, sort of show that he's just a little cog in a very big wheel, then I think the fans could take to him, and I think he could fit in very well.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see if he can overcome the attitude issue. I think he's a little bit in a spotlight in France, isn't he? With L'Équipe and a number of outlets do tend to focus on him. He's sort of, because he's the young sort of, I wouldn't go as far as saying he's the darling of PSG, but he is that sort of younger player coming through. He represents the city more than most of the team does. It'd be interesting to see whether you take him out of that spotlight a little bit. Obviously, the Italian press is still pretty ferocious, it can be at least. It would be interesting to see whether he manages to sort of figure himself out as a player, because there's an interesting sort of thing with Rabiot where he plays. He's disagreed with various coaches about what his best position is. Do we play him as a holding midfielder? Is he a sentinel, as the French were saying? He sits in front of the defence. Is he a box-to-box midfielder? Or is he even an attacking midfielder? Which he played there against Real Madrid in that Champions League knockout tie, which they lost in the first leg. Anyway, lost 3-1. Where do you see as his best position?
I actually think he is a very good sentinel, which probably frustrates him. If he had a few bad matches there, maybe it would help him because he wouldn't keep being put back there. But I think he doesn't come across as a classic box-to-box player because he's not as sort of physical. He's not the type that you notice kind of bombing up and down. But I just think he's a very sort of silky player, kind of, in a way, a bit of a sort of Ballack type, who on the top of his game I think can sort of very quietly control a match, bringing the ball from defence, transitioning to attack. I'd like to see him sort of make that kind of position his own. And certainly at Juventus, they're notorious for being hard on training and discipline, that kind of thing. I think it could be the making of him.
It'd be great to see him back in the France squad as the Rabiot that we know he can be. Because you're absolutely right. I would agree that I think he's a very talented player, but perhaps a little bit less consistent than he needs to be. And you think back to performances like that game against Real Madrid. Okay, they lost, but he was fantastic. Scored a goal in that game. Perhaps PSG standout player. You look back to the first leg against Barcelona. Obviously, the infamous 6-1 remontada overshadows the first leg, but he was absolutely fantastic in that first leg. And maybe playing all three of those positions we just talked about, to some extent, elements of them. He was so powerful running from midfield. He covered his back four really well, and he's creative in and around the box. So I think it's just whether he can settle and whether he can find that right sort of niche for him in Italy and be consistent, settle down for a couple of seasons and just play. It'd be great to see him back in the France team as that Rabiot that we know he can be.
Fascinating insight, chaps. Great to hear about Juventus and where it's all going to go right for them, especially with Maurizio Sarri. And great to talk to Rich Hall for the Gentleman Ultra as well, who quite clearly stated in no uncertain terms that the Scudetto will not be enough in his first season in charge. Next up, we're going to be talking to Jonathan Johnson from ESPN about Leonardo's return to PSG.
Love sport.
You are listening to the new Get European Football show with me, Matt Beadle, and the guys from Get Football, Adam White and Jeremy Smith. Remember, if you want to get in touch with us, it's very easy to do so. Join the discussion, 0208 7020 558. You can WhatsApp us on that number as well, or tweet us at Love Sport Radio. Now, we're going to be talking about Leonardo's return to PSG. We have got Jonathan Johnson, adding a bit of Scandinavian flair to the show there. A bit like Jonathan Johansson, the Finnish player who played for Charlton. He's calling in from ESPN in Paris. Jonathan, how are you?
Hey there, guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm very good, thank you. How are you all?
Very well, thank you. Delighted to have you on and looking forward to some good PSG insight. Now, this return from Leonardo to PSG, what's the deal here? Talk us through it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it had become increasingly inevitable that Ante Enrique and PSG weren't going to work out. And considering the scandals that PSG chairman and CEO Nasser Al-Khelaifi had faced over the last couple of years, PSG were in need of somebody to come in, sort of take a bit of pressure off of Al-Khelaifi, but also to essentially do a better job as sporting director than Enrique. And that's why, looking back to the beginning of the Qatari project, the Qatar Sports Investments, the group that owns PSG, decided that getting back in touch with Leonardo, someone who they have, been who've stayed in contact with over the years despite him leaving, it was best to sound him out and see if he'd potentially be interested in leaving AC Milan and rejoining the PSG project. As it turned out, things weren't working out for Leonardo in Milan, and that's how Leonardo has ended up back at Parc des Princes. He's replaced Ante Enrique, and he's now going about turning PSG back into a more professional project, similar to the one that we saw sort of disintegrate a couple of years ago and then descend into farce over the last sort of 18 months or so.
You mentioned that he's obviously coming back. He left under a bit of a cloud, and then, as you said, didn't have it brilliantly at AC Milan. Do you see him coming back as sort of tainted goods, or is this a positive move from PSG?
I mean, I can see why people are asking that. I mean, yes, of course, there were controversies that surrounded him, notably the scandal of pushing the referee. And getting a hefty ban because of that. There's also people who debate his transfer policy during his first time as sporting director, and many people who level a lot of blame at him for Ancelotti leaving early. I mean, Ancelotti himself, has spoken about how he felt betrayed by Leonardo with the way that he behaved in handing him an ultimatum before the Porto Champions League match. So, there's by no means is Leonardo an angel, but I think it's quite telling about how desperate the PSG fan base had become, that he was welcomed back with open arms, because although I think it was the right move for PSG and certainly looks like he's doing a good job since returning, it wasn't exactly the most imaginative of moves for PSG. But then again, PSG haven't exactly done much in the way of really intelligent business or decision making over the last couple of years, and perhaps it was sort of going with the tried and tested option that represented the smartest move. So I think we're going to have to wait quite a while before judging Leonardo on this second spell at PSG. But I can see why people would ask that he if he was coming back as tainted goods. But considering his reputation as a former player and also staff member at the club, I think people were happier to see him returning than they were asking questions.
What do you see as his sort of immediate business? What are the sort of crucial positions that PSG need to fill on the pitch?
Well, obviously, first and foremost, he needs to sort out the situation with Neymar, and if for some reason that a transfer doesn't materialise this summer, he's going to have to work out how to reintegrate him into the squad. I mean, there's still time for that transfer to go through. So I think he'll be waiting for Barcelona to indicate that they're ready to do business, to put an offer in front of PSG, and that's when he can start to work his magic. Because of course, as much as he fancied himself as a head coach, which didn't work out, in another part of his post PSG Sporting Director career, he does do business, very, very well, particularly when it comes to buying players or acquiring players at relatively decent prices. So I think that will be one of his first orders of business. He's also trying to get the youth academy back into some sort of coherent order after the absolute disarray it was left in by Enrique. But he also has a number of positions on the pitch which are looking pretty thin at the moment. He's tried sorting out the goalkeeper position, which has suffered hierarchy issues over a number of years now. It's never really been clear who was the number one, whether it was Alphonse Areola, Gianluigi Buffon, Kevin Trapp, Salvatore Sirigu. It's been going on for so long. It's ridiculous, and it's something that Thomas Tuchel got really fed up with towards the end of last season. So Leonardo tried to make a move to resolve that by bringing in Gianluigi Donnarumma, who would have been the undisputed number one. That hasn't worked out, so it looks like either Areola or Trapp will be given the chance to establish themselves as number one, with Areola the clear favourite for that. PSG also a bit short at right back, so I think that's definitely an area that Leonardo will have to concentrate on. But Thomas Tuchel has been very vocal in his wish for a real proper defensive midfielder to be added to his squad, and Leonardo is working hard on sorting that out at the moment. Everton's Idrissa Gueye is the favourite to come in and fill that role, but it seems like the midfield is going to be overhauled a bit this summer. There's rumours that Leandro Paredes will be moved on if a good offer is put in front of PSG, and of course he only arrived in January, so that's obviously a big surprise, but also sort of goes to show just how poor some of Enrique's business was regarded, really. And I think that those are the main orders of business, especially since Abdou Diallo has come in and strengthened in defence. I think defensive midfield, central midfield, right back, those are the areas that Leonardo will be looking at to do the majority of this business.
We've got to zone in a little bit more on Neymar. There's obviously a lot of rumours that Barcelona have been offering money and any one or two or three of up to 6 players in exchange. What is PSG's sort of preference in terms of Neymar leaving and what they'd get in return?
I mean, I think that what PSG want is for there to be an offer that doesn't make it look like they've sort of lost out in the 2 years that he's been in Paris. I mean, I don't think many people can really paint Neymar's time at Parc des Princes as a success, certainly, or the success on the pitch. If you're talking commercially, that's a whole different argument. But PSG will want to build a stronger squad, not just have a group of individuals, put them on the pitch and hope that they get the business done. This is been one of PSG's big failings since the beginning of the Qatari project. So what Leonardo will be looking for when Barcelona finally come to the table and actually put an offer in front of PSG, which they haven't done up until now, will obviously be some money, but also players that PSG feel they could use and actually sort of turn into a very strong starting 11. That's why Philippe Coutinho is being regularly linked with a move to PSG. He's a player that Pini Zahavi, who's working very closely with both Barcelona and PSG to make this move happen. He's trying to sort of set up that switch between Neymar and Coutinho, and I'd say if Barcelona added, some sensible names from their squad, perhaps players that they want to try and get rid of. I'm thinking the likes of Rakitic. Okay, Semedo, I know they don't want to get rid of, but being a right back, it's a position of need for PSG. Perhaps it's going to take that sort of sacrifice in order to bring PSG to the table and actually get this deal done.
Jonathan, I'd love to get your thoughts on Thomas Tuchel's position, because Antero Henrique leaving, their relationship was pretty fractious. That has to be seen as a bit of a win for Tuchel. But do you envisage a scenario where we start next season where Tuchel isn't in charge?
It is a win, but it's almost something of a Pyrrhic victory, because let's not forget that Leonardo is the guy who sacked Antoine Kombouaré when PSG were top of the table to bring in Carlo Ancelotti. So I don't think Tuchel can see his job as absolutely guaranteed and safe at this moment in time. And ultimately I don't think that Leonardo and Tuchel will sort of go on a sort of a long-term working relationship together. I think, assuming that Leonardo's second spell is not a complete failure, I think that he will want to bring in his own man at some point, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's got an eye on Allegri, since he was freed up by Juventus, and will perhaps want to try and bring him in, maybe at the end of this coming season. Whatever happens, I'm not sure that Tuchel will see out the remaining years in his contract. Remember, he signed an extension right at the end of last season. I think it might not be as dramatic or as unjust as the sacking of Kombouaré to make space for Ancelotti, but I do think that at some point Leonardo will want his own man in charge, and that man won't be Tuchel. But then again, Tuchel seems to be attracting a lot of interest from his homeland. He's been linked with the Bayern post in the past, so it also wouldn't surprise me if somebody came in, took Tuchel off of PSG's hands at some point, and PSG were then free, for Leonardo to make his pick and perhaps bring in someone that he feels that would sort of fit his vision of PSG better.
Jonathan, does this appointment as well, or this position, at PSG, also not complete the profile for someone like Jose Mourinho? It seems like this job is sort of tailor-made for Mourinho to finish up. He's been in the Premier League, he's been in Serie A, he's been in La Liga. You can just see him taking charge of PSG, no?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of, parallel similarities, qualities that would complement, a PSG and Mourinho relationship. But I also think that Mourinho's stock, has suffered in the last couple of years, and although I recognise that someone of Mourinho's mentality, very similar to Zlatan Ibrahimovic's mentality, is needed to succeed in the pressure cooker environment that is Paris. There's so many other things that the PSG are now looking for from their coaches. They were very spoiled in the days of Laurent Blanc, because nobody really expected that much from him. He actually delivered quite a lot in terms of silverware, but more than that, PSG were playing attractive, entertaining football for a decent amount of the time. They were trying their best to replicate, the great Barcelona side, that was still fresh in everybody's memory, but also. It was much better than some of the football that PSG fans have seen since under Unai Emery, and then at times under Thomas Tuchel. There have been moments under Tuchel where PSG have done some very innovative stuff. It's been very exciting, and Tuchel has shown himself to be a fantastic tactician, but it's not always delivered the sort of style that the PSG directors crave. They kind of want the continental success, but they also want it, done in a beautiful fashion. I'm sure that if PSG are to succeed in Europe, they're going to have to compromise on that front at some point. And perhaps it will take someone, like Mourinho, who has relatively recent Champions League titles to his name. To come in and deliver that. But at this moment in time, PSG are looking to be more progressive than going for somebody who, I think is still regarded by many as yesterday's man, particularly after his spell with Manchester United.
Jonathan, that's one. I'm very sorry, we've got to go. It's been great talking to you. That's Jonathan Johnson from ESPN. Right, after this, we're going to be speaking to Cameron O'Mara about Bayern Munich. Good evening, this is Love Sport. I am Matt Beadle and you're listening to the Get European Football Show. I'm joined by Get Football's Adam White and Jeremy Smith. Delighted to have you on the show today, chaps. This is going very, very well and I feel like it's going to get better. We're going to be talking about Antoine Griezmann and his move to Barcelona because Colin Millar from Football España is on the line. Hello Colin, how are you?
Hello, not too bad. Thanks for having me on.
Delighted to have you here. Now, Antoine Griezmann, a massive move to Barcelona. He has finally departed his beloved Atletico Madrid. How has this move been received in Catalonia?
Yeah, the reaction around this, it's been a bit of an odd one, really, because when you think about it, Griezmann, he's obviously a world-class player. He's unquestionably in the top 10 players in the world. Some might even say the top 5. This is a guy who's won multiple trophies at club level. Obviously for Atletico, been hugely successful. He's won a World Cup. He's in the prime of his career. And the fact as well that he commands a €120 million transfer fee, which obviously has a release clause, but that's highly significant. But I think it's a little bit odd because the level of publicity and the fanfare that surrounded this move has actually been a little bit low key. There's probably a number of reasons behind this. I think the main one is probably that a lot of people have suffered Griezmann fatigue, as it were. This is a move that's been over a year in the making. There's the protracted sort of discussion around his future last summer. And I think a lot of people sort of grew tired of that quite quickly. The fact that he obviously then put pen to paper in a new contract, and it was actually quite a tiresome thing to follow. And obviously he did a lot of PR surrounding it himself with his the Decision program, and then that obviously led to this season, which was a little bit of an underwhelming one for him. I don't think it was one of his strongest with Atleti, and he announced that he was leaving back in May, so it felt obvious at that time that Barcelona were going to be the club he would eventually join. Now Barcelona, they sort of, it's been alleged certainly within the Spanish media that they timed this deliberately to coincide with the closure of the Camp Nou pitch, so that fans couldn't attend the unveiling, as they had done with Frankie de Jong a couple of weeks earlier, and 25,000 had turned up, and it was a fantastic event. But I think the club were said to have feared a bit of a backlash on this one due to the fact of how he conducted himself last summer, and how much he publicised the whole build-up to then just saying that he's going to stay at Atleti. I think Barcelona felt a little bit, certainly a lot of their fans, they felt a little bit disrespected, maybe a little bit misled too. And it's probably also worth remembering that whilst Griezmann's season wasn't particularly special, this has also coincided with this constant talk that Neymar might indeed return to Barcelona too, and that sort of dwarfed every other discussion. So it's been it's been low key considering how significant a transfer this certainly would have seemed at any other point.
Where do you see Griezmann fitting into the team? Obviously, there's lots of talk about the Griezmann-Messi dynamic. There were reports today, actually, that Griezmann's still waiting for a phone call from Messi to welcome him to the club. Obviously, Messi's the main man, so where does Griezmann sort of fit around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's definitely something that everyone is probably guessing at the minute. And I said there the fact that there's all this talk about Neymar and his own situation, and a lot probably depends on that and how Barcelona are going to shape up next year. Now, I believe it's probably an unlikely deal due to the complication that's surrounding it and what still needs to happen. So let's theoretically say that the Barcelona start the season with the attacking lineup that they currently have. Now, Lionel Messi is obviously going to be the undisputed star of that. And I think that due to his status, due to the transfer fee, I think Griezmann has to start. He has to be in that strongest team. So that probably leaves maybe one space between Ousmane Dembele, Luis Suarez and Felipe Coutinho. you could probably see Coutinho being sold. That's certainly talk that he's on the market. Whether or not a club comes in and buys him, or whether or not he could be part of a name or deal is a different situation. And then we haven't even mentioned Malcolm, who doesn't really seem to fit anywhere at all in Valverde's plans. So I think that you could probably look at this season and think that Luis Suarez, who is now well into his early 30s, but his form has maybe been a little bit questioned. Whilst he still has fantastic output in terms of goals returned, there's question marks elsewhere, and his sort of general, his all-round game and fitness might be starting to fade a little bit. So the question might be that this could be Suarez's final season at the club, but I do suspect that Valverde will plan to accommodate Suarez and Griezmann alongside Messi for most matches. Although I think we have to remember as well that Valverde he's an adaptable coach, he's very flexible, and I think he's probably going to he's going to again go with the approach. He's going to change for games of maybe higher importance. He might go a little bit more conservative and shore up his midfield, which he has done quite a lot in the past with varying success. So I think maybe for the first time in a while, what Barcelona fans can be thankful for is that they can probably afford to rotate their attack a little bit more without a real reduction in quality. But I still think that without Messi, there's still big question marks over how that attack actually functions. So again, it's going to be very interesting to see how that pans out.
Griezmann's talked about kind of being at the service of Messi, but then based on what you say, could you see Valverde maybe playing a little bit more often with a 4-4-2 and maybe in a similar way to the way he plays with Giroud for France, maybe Griezmann sort of off Suarez and kind of looking after him, giving him a little bit more service?
Yeah, no, it certainly could be. And I think that in a way, Barcelona are obviously very lucky to have a player like Messi and what he can do. And I think that, in a sense, Griezmann, one of his main strengths is the fact that he's a player who can play almost in any part of the attack. He can play as a central figure, although I don't think he's quite as comfortable. He can maybe play slightly behind the front man, maybe, which could work quite well with Suarez, although it depends on how Messi then fits into that. Or he can play on either side. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how, just how they plan that out. And the other thing, of course, as well, is that with Dembele, with Coutinho, are they going to deploy a system whereby it's easy for them to come in on a match-by-match basis without a great deal of rotation within the system, or are they going to do it that they have their firm starting 11 with Griezmann there? So yeah, again, it's just something that might take a little while for us to see, but yeah, I think Griezmann's probably going to be most at home, playing behind maybe target man is the wrong word for Suarez, but certainly behind the leading striker.
You mentioned Valverde earlier, obviously after last season and certainly after the Copa del Rey loss to Valencia, his position looked slightly vulnerable. How do you see sort of his position coming into the season? Is he, the fact that he's still there, does that mean he's comfortable in his role, or is there a chance that he could be gone by this time next year or even during the season?
Yeah. I mean, they really looked for a while after the end of that season that it could be the end of Valverde at Barcelona. The European exit was particularly painful, and then it sort of followed up that Copa del Rey final loss. Almost, it's very strange to say this, it almost felt like the final straw, but there was a lot of then reports that that Barcelona were actively looking and speaking to other top level coaches. Whether or not that's true or not, and I think it probably was true. I'm not sure they had active plans to replace Valverde because he's very popular with the club's president, and they maybe didn't want to rock the boat too much. I cannot envisage a scenario where Valverde is going to be sacked or replaced before the season is out. The reason I say that is because I think Barcelona are still clear favourites for the league title. I believe that the chances of them winning the league is very, very strong, and if they do not, they're certainly going to be in contention right into the closing stages, especially if Messi stays injury-free. And I think within this context, Valverde's future almost certainly going beyond the season. It almost certainly depends on their performance in the Champions League, and should they not win the competition, or should they fail at a stage or in a manner that is similar to the ones that have preceded this, I cannot see Valverde lasting beyond the end of the season. If I had to say right now, I would guess that Barcelona probably will win another league, but I still think they're lagging a little bit behind in terms of how they approach the European competitions, and for that reason I think that at the end of the season they're going to look for a new man in the dugout.
Colin, I'd love to get your thoughts on the mental state of the club as it stands. The loss to Liverpool last season kind of mirrored the loss to Roma in the previous season. And after that loss in Rome, when they led the first leg 4-1, and of course lost away 3-0 and crashed out. And then Messi came out at the start of last season when he was made captain. He made that speech to the crowd and said, made a very obvious statement that the Champions League was the priority in this campaign. And then a very similar thing happens to Liverpool, arguably much worse. And it feels like there's sort of a mental issue developing at Barcelona in a similar way to Paris Saint-Germain. You look at PSG, and they're obviously perennial league champions. Barcelona have won 8 of the last 11 La Liga titles, which perhaps goes a little bit under the radar, but that's a sign of real dominance. Is there some becoming like a mental fixation on the Champions League, and how damaging was that loss to Liverpool last year? Are they still reeling from that? Is that something that's going to affect them going forward?
Yeah. I mean, listen, those failures in the past 2 seasons in the European stage have been really significant. I don't think you can overstate just how damaging, just how humiliating those exits were. The exit to Roma in 2018 was very, very painful. There was a sense that this should not happen, and it was maybe seen as a little bit of an aberration within an otherwise hugely consistent campaign of winning when it mattered, certainly domestically, but in the European stage they really let themselves down. And as you said, they've won 4 of the last 5 league titles, but yet because Real Madrid have been so successful in the Champions League during this time frame, it almost feels like Barcelona are underachieving. And it's very important to recognise that Barcelona and Real Madrid's sort of respective successes and failures are okay. Yes, of course they're measured in what they themselves do on the pitch, but they're also measured in terms of how the other does too. So Real Madrid's successes in Europe have almost exacerbated the fact that Barcelona have underachieved. This is a team, as I keep saying, with Lionel Messi and with the biggest wage budget there is in Spanish football. A very, very impressive starting 11, but the kind of club and sporting direction has maybe been a little bit questioned, certainly in comparison to the European rivals. So this domestic dominance, it's almost not being fully appreciated because they've made it seem so easy and so routine to win league titles by 10 or 11 points, and I think they've won 3 Copa del Reys in the last 5 years as well. So I think they've won 4 in the past 5 years. So it really shows you how strong and successful they've been in the domestic front. And Real Madrid are really the only club who can challenge them in terms of resources over the course of the season. And in each of the past 2 years, Madrid have been a bit of a mess, quite frankly. So Barca's incredible consistency, it's become the norm, it's become expected. And their European failures, which were genuine failures, by the way, they've become highlighted. And it's the manner of those defeats. Those have left huge psychological scars. A number of their players spoke about it after the defeat at Anfield. They were very vocal saying this, and as soon as we went 1-0 down, the sort of ghost of Rome
Colin,
came over us again. Yeah.
Just to quickly interject, boss, sorry, we're going to have to go to the ads very quickly, but I understand you've got a book out on the 9th of November. Do you want to just quickly tell us about that before we go?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. So obviously it's on the. I've written a book on the Seville derby called the Frank Pan of Spain, and it's because the city of Seville is known within the country by that title. So it was in that context that I titled my book, and I sort of explained why this isn't just Spain's hottest city in terms of weather, but also its football and rivalry. And I've been fortunate enough to live in the city and to immerse myself in the rivalry and be properly exposed to the derby. So I've tried to explain just how unique and special the derby is and how special the clubs are as well, not just within Spain but within European football. And yeah, it's something that it's coming out on the 12th of August, and yeah, so it's called the Frying Pan of Spain, Real Betis vis-a-vis Spain's hottest derby.
Colin, thank you very much for your time. Great listening to you.
Thank you so much.
That was Colin Millar of Football España. Very interesting, the chat about Barcelona losing to Liverpool. I've got a friend who lives in Castelldefels in Barcelona, and there's a little seaside bar next to him, and he went into it the morning after and it was an absolute disarray. He looked at the owner and said, "What on earth happened here?" The owner replied with one word, and that word, Liverpool. Coming up after the break, we are going to be reviewing the rest of the action in European football.
This Love Sport.
We are into the final 15 minutes of the Get European Football show on Love Sport. Me, Matt Beadle, here with Adam White and Jeremy Smith of Get Football. Now, I must very quickly correct myself because we had Colin Millar on from Football España before the ads, and I said his book was out on the 9th of November. His book is not out on the 9th of November. Of course it's not. The Frying Pan of Spain is already out, I believe.
It's on August the 12th.
August the 12th. There we go. It's on August the 12th. Sorry, Colin. Of course, the Sevilla Betis game is on the 9th of November. Silly me, a slap on the wrist. Now, fellas, I'm going to lead you to the last 50 minutes because you are going to take a look at the Twitter feeds of Get Football.
Absolutely. We thought we'd spend the last 15 minutes of the show looking through some of the latest transfer rumours from German, Italian and French football by looking at the Get Football Twitter feed. So first up, Jez, GIFN, Get Italian Football News. Anything that stands out for you there?
At _GIFN. I mean, the two interesting ones that have come out in the last couple of hours from Di Marzio are one that AC Milan, who seem to be linked with a lot of players at the moment under the beautiful Paolo Maldini, are apparently close to signing Angel Correa from Atletico Madrid. They're obviously on quite a big sort of transition period at the moment as well. Another decent striker for Milan to bring in their sort of quest to re-find their great days of the 90s. And the other one, which I think is a real sort of eyebrow raiser, is that Sami Khedira looks like he's not a part of Sarri's plans at Juventus anymore. So obviously he's aging, he's got a few injury concerns now as well, but that's a really classy, experienced midfielder who I think could be a real bargain for quite a few teams around Europe.
Yeah, almost ironically, Juventus is so good at signing free transfers, they've released their own very good potential free transfer. I guess that Khedira's place in that Juve squad has sort of slowly expired over the last couple of seasons, and with the additions of players like Ramsey and Rabiot obviously costing nothing in terms of a transfer fee, they've kind of sort of usurped him a little bit, and he's obviously a very talented player, and he's very experienced and a classic Juve midfielder. It really suits the club, but his sort of powers are on the way, and he's well into his 30s now, and it seems like he's just sort of been phased out over the last few seasons.
I think that that generation of German footballers who won the sort of last World Cup by one, they all seem to be sort of going slightly downhill now. You know, Ozil's problems at Arsenal are well publicised. Even Manuel Neuer isn't as formidable as he used to be. So yeah, possibly it's the sort of changing of a generation, and certainly Ramsey's not the youngest, but Ramsey and Rabiot, and even the possibility of Pogba coming back to Juventus. Certainly Khedira, he's surplus to requirements there now, but still a good signing, I think, for quite a few teams.
For sure. While we're still on at GIFN, the Get Italian Football News, Jordan Veretout, who's a French player, he was very good at Nantes, came through there, was their sort of stand-up player, and left for Italy. His game's really developed in Serie A, and has signed for Roma today officially for £20 million. How do you see him fitting in there? Is it a good signing?
I think so. He was one of the unsung stars of the France under-20 World Cup team that won the 2013 edition. There's players like Pogba, Thauvin, Titi in that team, but I think Veretout is one of those players who sort of very quietly got on with his business. I remember he scored a great penalty in the shootout against Uruguay in the final. I think we were talking earlier about Rabiot's versatility. I think that was at Nantes, that was Veretout's problem. He was kind of chucked into any position that needed filling at any moment and played them all well, but it meant that he didn't sort of consistently make one place his own. Speaking to Villa fans, I think it was just sort of wrong place at the wrong time there, and they felt that they had a very good player, and it just didn't quite work out. But certainly at Fiorentina, in a sort of struggling team, I think he's really made a name for himself, and I think it's great to see that he's got that move, and possibly I think he's been pre-selected for the France squad in recent months, and maybe it's a chance for him to break into that squad.
Absolutely. I think he's a really interesting little player. I think it really shows that younger players moving abroad is a potentially career-altering thing. We talk about English players not moving abroad, or moving abroad to the Bundesliga in particular in recent seasons, but the sort of whether they do or don't has become sort of an on-running saga, and it just goes to show that players of any footballing culture, if you like, if they move abroad, the exposure to different ideas, to a different footballing culture can really develop their game. And I really feel like Jordan Veretout was a little bit one-dimensional at Nantes. He was a very, very good player, technically gifted, but never really, for me, in Ligue 1 really grabbed the games by the scruff of the neck. And in Italy, that different facets of his game have been developed, and it's clearly because he's been exposed to that different footballing culture, which is really good to see.
I think certainly the France '98 squad, a lot of them played in Italy, and it's been a recurring theme since that. Yeah, I think moving abroad is the making a lot of these players, but Italy in particular, as I said earlier, the sort of rigor of the training, the intense focus from the media, that kind of thing. I think that's the one country that France really see as the place that makes sort of talented boys into men, I guess. And yeah, it seems to be still the case now, 20 years on.
Just slightly further down the Get Italian Football News Twitter feed is Nicola Pepe. We sort of haven't mentioned him. He's sort of been conspicuous by his absences over this course of the show. What do you think about Pepe's potential move? We know he's going to leave. Christophe Gauti has come out and said that he will be sold this summer. But it seems like there's a bit of a merry-go-round with Liverpool potentially making a bid, Inter Milan very interested, and Napoli, we understand, potentially interested in him as well. Is he a player that would suit a move to Napoli, do you think?
I think he could do. I think he'd really progress under Ancelotti. I think the problem with Pepe at the moment, that there seems to be so many vague rumours about so many teams being interested, even down to kind of Arsenal, Everton, and it doesn't seem that anyone is coming through with a proper concrete bid. And I think Lille and his agent were possibly holding back, thinking if he has a great African Cup of Nations, we can chuck another 20 million onto the price tag. Unfortunately, he didn't have a good one, and now I think teams are looking to knock 20 million off the price tag. He's definitely going to go, and I think at his best he'll be a great addition to a lot of teams, particularly the type who was sort of fast breaking. I think he'd fit very well into Bayern as a replacement for Robben. He's a similar kind of player, likes cutting in from the right onto his stronger left foot. He seems to be holding out for PSG, but they don't seem that interested at the moment. I think everyone involved is playing a slightly dangerous game at the moment. And I think that today Lopez, Lille's president, sort of for the first time broached the possibility of him staying. But Lille financially really need to sell. He's going to go somewhere, but I think ultimately it's going to be for a lot less than Lille are hoping for.
One thing that I think goes a little bit under the radar when talking about Pepe is a lot of people talk about his stats of last season. One of a handful of top 5 league players to make it into double figures for goals and assists. I think he got 22 goals and 11 assists. One thing that does go a little bit under the radar is that I think 9 of those goals are penalties, which kind of skews it a little bit. I mean, if you let Loic Remy take the penalties, it's going to be a slightly different situation coming into the season. Moving on to GFFN at GFFN for French football transfer latest. Porto interested in Kevin Trapp, which I'm sure a lot of PSG fans will be very happy to see. Looking further down, Saido Berahino has accepted a trial with league side Nîmes this Saturday. He is set to imminently terminate his contract with Stoke City. A bit of a left field move for Saido Berahino there. I remember watching PSG in a pre-season friendly bizarrely against West Brom. It was in Austria in a pre-season training camp, and there wasn't much of a crowd, and it was just basically a field, but with PSG playing West Brom, and Tony Pulis was in charge, and the soundtrack was sort of a very quiet one, except for Tony Pulis shouting Saido for the entire game. His career's gone a little bit downhill. Play for Burundi, I think, in the African Nations Cup this summer. But is Nîmes a good move for Berahino, do you think?
It could be. Nîmes had a sort of quietly excellent season in Ligue 1 with a team made up mostly of sort of, I guess, late 20s players who possibly haven't achieved amazing things in their career, and just the coach got them all playing brilliantly together as a team. Obviously they need to consolidate this year. That was their first year back in Ligue 1. Hopefully they can maintain that, because they have sold a few of their star players from last season, not least of which is Teji Sevanya, who in a lot of people's eyes should have won Ligue 1 Player of the Year.
Absolutely,
certainly been amongst one of the top nominees. So on that basis, if they're able to get the best out of Berahino and sort of get him back to what he showed at the very, very start of his career before he got slightly too big for his football boots, then there's a possibility there that it could be a success, but I wouldn't put any money on it.
Something else from further down the GFFN Twitter feed. Crystal Palace and Valencia joined West Ham United in a race for AS Monaco right back Djibril Sidibe, who is available for 15 million. Djibril Sidibe is one of those players that is prominent in European football, was obviously brilliant in that season that Monaco won the league. You know, he was relied upon with Benjamin Mendy to be very attacking on either flank. The fullbacks really provided width, but defensively, he's got a lot to learn, hasn't he?
I've personally never rated him as a defender. It's okay going forward, but I've never thought he was a stable defender. And obviously in the last season, he's really suffered from it, or more than a season actually. He was relatively lucky to get into the World Cup squad, but he's really suffering from injuries now. So there is a decent player there, but yeah, I'd worry about him, about anyone getting a full season out of him, and certainly I wouldn't call him a reliable fullback.
Moving on to the GGFN Twitter feed, get German football news. Check it out on Twitter. At the top here, we've got Red Bull Leipzig signing Ademola Lookman finally.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to jump in, Adam. Sorry, we're not going to get to Ademola Lookman. Of course, he's gone to Red Bull Leipzig, as has Ethan Ampadu, I believe, as well, of Chelsea. He's also joined him on loan, I think,
some
today.
Interesting Bundesliga moves today.
There absolutely is. Fellas, it has been thoroughly enjoyable. A good 90 minutes of European action we've had today. This is Love Sport Radio. We are going to be back at 9 p.m. again next week with the guys from Get Football, Adam White and Jeremy Smith. I've got to say, chaps, the oracles of European football. I've learned a hell of a lot in the past 90 minutes. Great to have you on. Like I said, we'll be back again at 9 p.m. next week. Remember, Love Sport Radio and the European Football Show.